Welcome, everyone. This is another session of Elite Masterminds, a session where agents send me questions. And it's through these questions that I then go through and research answers, or alternatively, I will bring in guests and pose those questions through to them. Now, in the session today, I want to talk about something that is going to take your listing presentations to a whole new level. I really want to take that listing presentation to a level where your sellers are looking at you with these massive eyes and going, I've never seen that before. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. It's innovative listing presentations. And this I'm actually quite excited about. Now, there's 5 that I'm going to be sharing with you as we go through, and I'll be going through them in a little bit of detail so that you can actually understand what was going through my head when I was researching and pulling bits and pieces of information together. But I want to start out with this little quote. I don't know who said the quote, but I found this quote while doing some research, and it goes like this: in a world full of noise, the one who dares to be different is the one that gets remembered. So, in a world full of noise, the one who dares to be different is the one who gets remembered. And that particular quote really, it jumped out at me because I thought, well, think about this. When we're going on listing presentations, there is so much noise. There are so many agents going after that same property. They're all doing things, but really, most of them are doing the exact same thing, just in a different way. Maybe they've got a different color shirt on, or maybe they've just actually brought more papers than somebody else. But the ones that are different, the ones that stand out with something that's so unique, when you leave the appointment, the seller goes, oh my gosh, that was amazing. That was something that we've never experienced before. You see, I don't want to go through things that you already know, things that you already do. I want to go through some listing strategies that's going to actually make your seller kind of just stop, and almost while you're having conversations with them, they almost start to lean into you and they go, wait a minute, I've never seen that before. I've never heard of that before. Tell me more. And they start to get excited, but they also start to get involved. And that's what I wanted to go through. I wanted to take a listing presentation, take a strategy, and just blow it out of the water and really take it to a point where your sellers are going to be looking at you going, wow, this is innovation. So there are a couple little innovations that I'm going to share with you that will require potentially some AI if you want to start integrating all of that. But I'm going to go through 5. There's 5 of them that I'm going to share with you. And I think you're going to actually enjoy all of them. So the very first one, and this one, when I actually came about it, I actually sat down and I said to myself, what would it be like if we created almost like a storyboard? It's a storyboard of their particular property. Now, what I mean by this is, think of this. You actually take a couple of videos of a property, and maybe you superimpose. This is where you could use a little bit of AI. Maybe it's just taking pictures, but you actually superimpose maybe a little baby taking their first steps in the living room. Or maybe it's something where you've got a whole family that's laughing and cheering and just having a huge amount of emotional fun around a dining room table. Or maybe it's something where it's got a view on a deck that goes out, and you've actually got this image of somebody sitting on the deck. Maybe they're having in the early morning, they're having a nice cup of hot chocolates or coffee, or maybe it's in the light afternoons where they're having their sundowners and drinks, and they're actually seeing that. Now, just imagine this for a moment. Imagine being able to create those type of experiences, and you're going through to your seller and saying, this is how I present your property. I'm not just taking static images and just a quick little video tour of the property, but I'm actually creating a future memory type of storyboard of your property. I'm taking your property, I'm creating this environment whereby people can almost relate to it going into the future. Now, if you've got the advantage that they've got a newborn baby and they can take some first steps, or maybe they've got a table and you can get everybody around and you can actually create this cinematography type of experience. The key to this is once you've got this type of video, this type of experience, this is how you're actually going to market and sell. You're actually going to sell this emotional experience, not just in words, but actual images. Now, you could do this in a, call it in a movie type of storyboard type of scenario where it could even have a journey, young baby walking, then jumping into the pool, then enjoying the actual back garden. Ultimately, creating something from nothing is what you're wanting to do. Now, how would you present this to your seller? You're thinking, well, shit, I'm arriving there for the very first time. Well, if you are pretty key with your actual laptop, maybe you've got AI and you've got it inside there. There's a lot of AI tools. You can actually say, hey, wait a bit. What about us doing this? Take a couple of pictures, you download it onto your laptop, you actually do this little storyboard and actually creates this little, call it 15-second, 20-second video of that property, creating that future memory. You play that back to them and say, this is what we're going to be presenting out. So when a buyer's coming in, they've actually got this emotional connection. They're creating a memory that hasn't happened yet, and they're actually thinking to themselves, hey, I want that memory to be mine. So there's the first one. We call it future memories. And I know for some that might have gone, hey, Stuart, that was over my head. Or I never even thought about that. It's placing a buyer in a property that hasn't bought it yet, but experiencing and creating a future memory. So that was the very first one. I actually called that future memories, something that was out there. All right. So the second one is, okay, it's also a little bit of a difference, but it's something where you have a silent feedback theater. Wow. So many words that you're putting together there, making absolutely no sense. Right. So let me explain exactly what I mean to this. What you would create is you'd create an environment where buyers are walking through a property. Now, you can do this beforehand. Okay. You create a video where buyers are walking through a particular property. Now, you could have actual people and you just say, hey, by the way, I want to do this in acting, or again, you could use AI. But what's so important about it is you're actually listening to them talk about the property. So if they're walking into the kitchen and you have a camera looking from behind and you've got a husband and wife looking at each other and saying, you know, this kitchen is rather small. Or it could be something where they're walking out onto a deck and going, this deck is so amazing. Just imagine the kids sitting out here and actually playing in the pool. We're sitting. What you want to create is the words from a buyer about a property. And that could be any property. Now, here's what's so powerful, and I'll tell you where this originated from. What is so powerful is it creates a comparison for the actual property. So, what do I mean by comparison? I've walked into properties where the kitchen is small and ultimately it's a little bit on the cluttered side. And I've actually said to the actual seller in a very respectful manner, hey, you know what, we need to declutter your kitchen. But sometimes a seller could actually take offense to that. So the method that I used was I would actually have pictures of a cluttered kitchen and have a picture of a open plan, very clean looking kitchen and actually present it to the seller and just say to them, if you were going around and buying a property, which one would you choose? 9 times out of 10, they always go for the decluttered, the clean, the modern, that type of feel. And it was actually on that where I thought, hey, if we took this to another level, instead of it just being pictures, you could actually create that video where someone is actually talking, whether it's a voiceover or something of that. Hey, walking into this room, it's a small kitchen, it's a little bit cluttered, it's a little bit dark, or it could be positive responses. But here's the kicker. Here's the part, the little script that really, when I was sitting down, I suddenly said to myself, hey, wait a minute. This is where you could take it to the next level. You play that video to your seller. They're looking at it. They're actually feeling, wow, this is actually amazing. It's not my property, but wow. And then you say to them this. Now imagine what they would say in your home. Just those little sentence. Now imagine a buyer. Imagine what they would say in your home. Pause. And then you end with, why don't we shape this experience together for those future buyers? Why don't we shape that experience together for those future buyers? Now, what that really does is it gets the actual seller starting to think about their property. Hey, buyers are going to come into our property. They may like something, they may not like something. And really, what it starts to almost move in the right direction is for a seller to get their home prepared. But you see, this is that wow factor that stands out because no other agent is doing this. So the great thing with this is you're actually not using their property, using another property, using a voiceover, maybe actors, maybe it's AI. But what you're wanting to do is you want to connect it to their property so that they start to think. These are little experiences that they really start to go out there. Now, the third one that I want to share with you is one that we do all the time. We go out there with the CMA, the competitive market analysis, 5 properties on the market, 5 properties that are sold. We put all these pages in front of them, and really the dining room table or the kitchen counter starts looking a little bit on the messy side, where we're starting to say, hey, your property fits roughly here on the properties that have sold, so we can see the pricing range. And then if we look at the properties that are on the market, and I used to do that. And I actually found that in that process, I found that my sellers were almost kind of deterred. They kind of like went in a different direction. They kind of looked at me like, oh, all right, but here's what you can do. And this is using AI technology again, is take in pictures. So for instance, if you've got, and you can see properties that are currently on the market, you can see them on the portals, you could almost copy the link for that particular property, or maybe 3 or 4 of those properties, putting it into a GPT, into AI, and then actually having a few photos of the current property and saying, these are the properties that we want to compare to in this particular neighborhood. So using the actual AI to do a quick little scan, quick little research across all of those pictures or all of those actual links, and then uploading the pictures of the property and then asking AI, give us a comparison. What are the key features that makes this property stand out over the other properties? And what are the key features that could actually put us on a back foot against the other properties? Now, here using technology is an absolute amazing way of actually doing a comparison that is actually puts you in the best possible position. Why? Because when you walk into a property and you say to somebody, you know what, your rooms are rather small and your kitchen's a little bit dated, that seller takes offense. But when you're using technology, you're separating yourself. And ultimately, you're saying, hey, we can actually use AI technology. We'll do a quick little comparison. These are the 5 properties that we've actually selected. And they could say yes or no to those properties. And then you start doing the comparisons. And it'll actually come back and say, hey, by the way, it looks like X, Y, and Z. This particular way of doing it, as I mentioned to you, it pulls you out of that conversation where there's anything negative, And what it shows is, hey, wait a minute, we've actually got a true neutral response. It's coming out from AI. It's now coming out with these particular responses. And it really starts to take what you're doing to another level. Now, you can do the same example, but you could actually say, hey, wait a minute, here is a suburb. So I'm using the exact same real-time neighborhood property comparison, but just taking this one step further. This is what typically happens when I actually create these informations and my brain starts running at a high speed. You could actually take a suburb from a property portal and actually ask, hey, what are the top properties in this particular suburb? And it can actually search, pop them back at you so that you know what those properties are, so that you don't have to be selective of which ones they are. This would be the step before I've just shared with you. Now that you've got those 5 properties or 3 properties, you then can compare it with the actual client's properties and say, hey, give me a comparison. How does this property fit in amongst these properties if we listed it at this particular price? Using all of these instructions, going into AI, can be a very powerful way of showing that you're not just an agent that is, well, that's a very overpriced property and this is an underpriced property. Your bedrooms are small. You're actually getting something that's very neutral behind this. So using an AI type of comparison tool instead of the traditional printing out 5 properties that have sold, and they could have sold 9 months ago, 5 properties that are currently on the market, because you've selectively pick properties that either are overpriced or are slightly different, because we do have a bit of a subjective nature to all of that. So that's the third one, is using the AI as a comparison tool so that you can step out. Now, this is all part of your presentation to your particular clients, and this will actually help them to get a better understanding of their property, where it actually fits. And you actually are just adding some tools that blows their mind out. Now, I've never seen any agent use that, but I'm pretty sure it's something that could actually go from it. The fourth one actually came out of a thought process that I had. It was many, many years ago. I had an agent that sent me a letter introducing themselves as the agent in the area. And this was, I'm going to say it was probably a good 17, 18 years ago when I received this particular letter. I read the letter and I thought, okay, this is pretty nice, it's interesting. But then I received a second letter. And the second letter was basically, hey, thank you for reading my first letter. I just wanted to let you know that I'd actually listed a property a little bit down the street and we'd actually sold it, and gave me a whole lot of details on it. And I was like, okay, well, it's interesting. It's left it at that. Then I received a third letter. And the third letter was, I actually had an appointment with this particular owner and they didn't list with me. And the reason why they didn't list with me is they actually wanted to overprice it. And there was a whole story, a whole reason behind all of that. And this actually got me going. This got my mind thinking. What they were doing is, and if you'll remember, there used to be something years ago called the chain letter. You basically have one letter, you fill it in, you send it to somebody else, they fill it in, sends it to somebody else, and sends it to somebody else. And there's this chain of letters that actually starts to go through. And then my mind started to think, hey, how could we take that and make it modernized? How could we take that and bring it into current day effects? So this particular process, it's going to depend on if your audience has, if you've got the email address, maybe you've got a WhatsApp, or maybe they do have a post box and you can pop it in their mail. But starting out with that introduction was a great way of just breaking the ice. And then actually going through this process of a chain mail type of letter, of basically stating, hey, I've sold this property, and you give details on that. And your next letter that goes through, it could actually be a property that maybe you're wanting to list, but you haven't got it yet. You could actually send it to all the neighbors if you wanted to. Hey, We are trying to get our next listing to sell. We do not want to break the chain of selling properties because our success is, and you could add a little fact, one per month, two per month, three per month. You can actually use the agency if there's a lot selling in that particular suburb every single month and creating this chain letter. Now, this was really thinking way outside of the box. And it was just taking something that was put in place many, many years ago. And it actually just came back to me. And I thought, I'm sure that could work. I'm sure you could actually try that and actually go ahead. And I say try it because I haven't personally done it, but it was done to me and it actually got us excited. My wife and I were actually like, well, let's have a discussion with this agent just to see what they're on about. They've sold a property, they didn't sell a property, but they were quite disappointed. But they're looking for another one so they can continue this particular chain. Has a little bit of a sense of humor that was wrapped behind it, but it is something where it starts just to lead up an introduction, what you've done, and then you want to continue this chain of selling and ultimately become, well, have them become part of your chain of success as you're going through the property. I know it's a wild one. I know it's a really wild one. And I know some of you are going to go, not for me, but I know some of you are going to go, hey, that could actually work. So think about that one. And then the last one. Now, this was inspired by a TV show, Extreme Makeover. I'm sure many of you have actually seen this, where they literally come in with this massive team and they almost destroy the property and rebuild the property. People come in, they are like, wow. And they got so much like, this is amazing. I sat there and I thought, how could I take that idea and put it into an idea where you're doing a seller's presentation? And it took me a while, but then it suddenly jumped at me. You see, for many of us, when we walk into a home, that home may be staged, it may not be staged. Um, and you can actually have this opportunity. Now, here's the opportunity. It will require you to invest in a few items. For instance, maybe you've got a pot plant with some flowers inside. Maybe there's a picture or two, maybe a couple of throws, rugs, things like that, that you can actually take into a lounge, a dining room, a bedroom, something of that nature, a room. And you can actually go to that particular seller and say to them, you know what? Let's actually do a 1 hour makeover of one of your rooms. And you be specific because you know you've got all those little goods and pieces inside. Now, they're going to be looking at this and going, why? And you say, well, this is what actually happens. You see, when a buyer comes into a property, the first impression is the lasting impression. Now, many a times when we take professional photos, we stage the property, we clean it up, we neat it. I'm hoping you do that, but we neaten up the property to make sure that the picture is the best. But what we want to do is actually show you the process that we go about doing it. So let's take your lounge, 1 hour of your time. We'll do a quick little makeover, show you how we can transform this lounge into something that's staged that we'll actually use for professional photos. Now, what's amazing about this is the equipment is yours. If you want, you could do the makeover and until then, well, they can buy everything. Or you actually can say, we can do a 1 hour makeover for less than 2,000 Rand. So you can actually put a value if you wanted to it. But what you're actually doing is you take a room and you go through it. Now, in the steps, take a before picture, take an after picture, take pictures during the process, get the seller involved with this actual transformation. Now, sounds like a lot of hard work, but I can tell you it's a lot more fun than sitting at a dining room table trying to convince them to actually list their property with you. What you're actually doing is you're actually showing that you're an agent that doesn't just talk and present. You're an agent that's with actions. You actually will go out there and you will transform a property into its best appearance. Now, for those of you that might not have that design element to see how you can make things look pretty, the great thing here is you can actually just do some simple Googling. There are simple vases, throws, rugs, etc. If you put them in place, ultimately it transforms an entire room. And all you've got to do is declutter. You're now getting a permission to declutter the actual room where you just move it to one side, adding one, two, three, four different pieces into that particular room with before and after pictures and showing that to your particular seller. Suddenly your seller is seeing, hey, wait a minute. You're not just the typical real estate agent who walks through my house, taking pictures with their mobile phone, posting it onto the different portals, bringing a buyer around, allowing the buyer to walk freely through the home, taking an offer and walking out. What you are is you're an active buyer. You're an active agent. You actually take this property, you've got care in the property, you transform this property into an experience. You bring your buyers that you can actually explain exactly what's done in this particular room. And you can actually almost give them this journey, this experience that you're going through. You see, by doing this, your seller will recognize you as somebody different. And these are the five that I wanted to share out with you. I know some of them are going to be really, really outside of the box, but that is exactly the purpose of this particular session. I wanted to almost share with you some innovative ways, something that's never been done before. That's why it feels uncomfortable, because it's never been done before. And maybe it has been done, but not to the level that I've actually ever seen with any agents. As I mentioned, this took me a while to say, hey, I'm putting myself into the shoes of a real estate agent again. I want to now take this where when I walk into a particular property, the actual seller goes, I've never seen this before. I don't want that world full of noise to be kind of mixed and lost and everything like this. Is it a risk? Of course, it's a risk. But you know what? You want to dare to be different. And it's the one that is different that gets remembered. And that's ultimately what I was looking at in today's particular session. Give you five different ways that you can actually go to a property, whether it's before the property with that chainmail letter, whether it's at the property, giving some kind of future memories that you're actually created. Maybe it's experience of what a buyer might say at a property, getting them thinking about their property. Or actually going to the root of where you actually take a room, do a makeover of that particular room, and actually show them what can be done to help them to sell the properties. Or use AI as some form of comparison tool that actually takes you out of the actual picture to say your bedrooms are small, your kitchen is dated, and allows technology to give facts. And it's from that that you can actually then go ahead with some form of presentation that encumbers all of these different elements. Try one of them, put one into action. Maybe you think of something else. But what I wanted with this particular session is I wanted you to see that the traditional methods is done by every agent. You want to do the non-traditional methods. You want to stand out. You want people to remember you. You want people, when you walk away, they go, I've never experienced that before. I never thought of that before. I never saw it from that angle before. I want them to be talking about you, not just while you're there, but when you leave. I want that to be a lasting memory, because it's that lasting memory that gets you to stand out. And you want to basically have this power tool in your box that when you go to an appointment, people look at you and say, you're actually doing something that nobody else is doing. You're doing something that actually is elevating real estate to a whole new level. And that's what I wanted to share with you today is taking innovation. You'll see that when you think out of the box, it sometimes sounds crazy, but rather be the crazy person that leads than the crazy person that's drowned by everybody around us, where everyone is crazy. So be that leader, step out of there. This was actually one of those sessions where I always love to go through it, because doing something that is innovative can make you feel a bit uncomfortable. But it's with these elite masterminds where we actually want to take the uncomfortable and make it comfortable. So I know that was a crazy session. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to getting your types of comments, responses as to what you've tried. Maybe there's something different that you've done. Share it with me because I'd love to know about it and see how we can actually improve on that. So, Elite Masterminds, this was a great session. Look out for future sessions where we take things maybe not as extreme as being as innovative as this particular session, but definitely we'll be taking the questions that come from agents. We'll be answering them either with guests or through research to help you in your particular business, to take you from where you are right now to the next level. So from myself, Stuart, I want to thank you for coming into this session.